We don't know the exact businesses that made any comments, so we have to guess to some degree in some cases. But that's built for obvious confidentiality built into the process. So all these action plans and recommendations will be coming back to council and to the other partner organizations as well, the Chamber of Commerce, ELNOS, the East Algoma CFBC, and of course the province, as we try to improve the business climate in Elliot Lake from here on.
How many businesses? I know you interviewed 100, but how many were the total businesses that were available to you?
It's difficult to have an exact number based on our online business directory that we have at the website and the Chamber of Commerce's directory. We had approximately 375 businesses that we could choose from, and of those 375, we reached the 100 randomly selected. We tried, based on the percentages of those businesses in certain sectors, we tried to mimic those sectors. So if there were 22 retail businesses or 22% of retail businesses in the community in our business directory, we ended up interviewing roughly 22 retail businesses. In some cases, we chose to oversample because let's say in the sector of manufacturing, we only have maybe 3 or 4, and we use the term manufacturing rather loosely. We did our best to interview all of them just because it's such a small sector and possibly a sector we'd like to see grow, so we wanted to get our best effort at getting as much information out of those particular businesses as possible. So, but that information will also be available in the final report for everyone to see.
The 375 or approximately businesses, how many employees does that represent, including the owners and that?
I would have to look at that. I'm guessing in the 3,000 range, 3,000 jobs.
I have a reason for asking that question, because those are all new jobs since the mine's closed. Because all the jobs that existed in Elliot Lake prior to 1990 would have disappeared because they were all supporting the mines. So we, in effect, have 375 businesses that are successful in Elliot Lake, employing in the range of 3,000. Which is an amazing story.
True enough, yes.
Yeah. So, and closing remarks, what do you have for us?
Oh, just have a bit of a teaser, something that will be shown in the Wednesday edition of the Standard in more color and more detail, but I thought the public, given some of the concerns we've had about the parking in the Lower Plaza, would like to see the artist rendering of what that Lower Plaza parking lot will look like in the future. I'll have some hard copies provided to council and to members of the public in the gallery. But as I mentioned, this will be made public in the Wednesday edition of the Standard, and we'll be posting it online on our city's website as of Wednesday morning. I think this should show up appropriately on TV. We'll see, with Bob's help.
So can you just maybe explain what we're looking at here?
Sure. This is a view of what will be the Lower Plaza, let's say June of 2007, give or take. Some of the trees are rather large, depending on, we'll see how that goes. You have to remember this is an artist rendering, but something to this effect. Certainly the grass and the landscaping and the shrubbery will all be, actual size. This is a view of the Lower Plaza in the ELNOS building from the current Rexall location in the Lower Plaza across from the LCBO. The raised area, of course, is the mound of fill that you see now currently in the Lower Plaza. The ELNOS building will be the new clinic building, which has yet to be named. We have a Rexall logo on that building, but that's just, just the artist rendering, taking some liberties. You'll notice that there's a sidewalk on the lower parking. There's stairs going up to the raised area, and there's also a handicap accessible sort of phased ramp going up to the right with fairly attractive blocks, rocks holding up that part of the wall. I'm not sure what else. Quebec Road, of course, will be likely turned into a one-way between the Fireside Inn and the ELNOS, just coming down so that we know that the traffic is coming down the hill from Ontario Avenue into the lower parking area. But you would be able to take a vehicle into that raised parking area from the TD Bank, go in that way and come out if you so choose.
And that, one completed, adds 20 parking spaces to the downtown core?
Overall, it adds 20 parking spaces that weren't there before we started. and it adds approximately 70 parking spaces that are of level access to the LNOS building, which of course, as we know, before this project certainly was not the case.
Good. And Councillor McTaggart?
Yeah, Dan, people will be able to drive down Quebec. No, they don't have to be going to the medical clinic. They can come down that way. They just can't, because it's going to be one way, they just won't be able to get. So that after the
Exactly.
construction's over and the bus starts to stop in front of,
Yes.
the bus route will be going that way, stopping in front of that building. But people will be able to travel through there. So now, right now, they're restricted to having to come in between the CIBC and the Royal Bank. Like they have to come in.
Yes.
Sketch, yeah.
Yeah, simply
But
during the construction time. Once
that's
the
right.
and even this should briefly speak. I won't be held to the exact dates, but we will be. The plan is to have the parking lot functional before this winter. So there will be a top layer of asphalt put in place, and I presume that road will be opened up again, and the parking will be able to be used this winter and plowed appropriately. And then we'll be returning in the spring to finalize the landscaping and the line painting and the fine tuning. However, the parking lot will be functional by this winter. And of course, the top layer of asphalt is important to make sure that next spring we can avoid a lot of mud down there if we've got the top layer of asphalt at least in place and help plowing over the winter.
Can you just explain, because I think there's a misunderstanding at the present time with the new parking lot configuration in the lower part that today exists in front of the Bank of Montreal and Rexall and all the way towards the Electronic Center and down towards the No Frills. The same number of parking spaces have been maintained that existed in between, like where it was doubled up.
I can't speak to the exact amount. I'm not sure if
Rob,
Mr.
can you-
DiBertoldi knows, but I do know that, anecdotally, there's certainly a lot more spaces with the nose-in parking in front of the Bank of Montreal than there were before. Of course, that was all off limits before, where you weren't even able to stop, while loading and unloading. So that is, to some degree, an improvement. But I can't speak to the exact amount of numbers.
But I think
spaces.
Mr. Perkins, when he was designing this to make it more user-friendly the way it is now, he indicated that he was able to retain the same number of parking spots that were blocked off, and these ones were created that existed before. So in terms of the no frills, the same number of parking spaces that were available before are still, they're just in different spots, maybe one a little further than it was before, one is not in the middle, it's off to the side, but one is in front of the Bank of Montreal, rather underneath the telephone or the light fixed post. So, well, thank you very much. And Councillor Sully?
I think there's one thing we've forgotten in all this too. With the bus coming down Quebec Road now, it's going to be safer for people with a disability or handicap. They will be exiting the bus on the right-hand side in front of the TD Bank instead of in the middle of the parking lot, because we had difficulties with people exiting the bus and not being able to be seen between the parked cars or to be seen away from the traffic coming. So that's going to make it a little bit safer too. And I just thought of something, Councillor McTaggart, your last election campaign came true, because the buses will come up Ontario, down Quebec, and Ontario again. The buses are going to go round and round.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gagnon. So that completes our public presentations for tonight. We'll move back to correspondence and reports. We've dealt with item 1. Item 2 is a letter from the coordinator of the Santa Claus Parade concerning services required for the Santa Claus Parade scheduled for Friday evening, November the 24th. And it's from Mrs. Darla Hennessy, and she's asking for the Elliot Lake Fire Department to transport our local dignitaries. I presume that's the old fire truck. And then the Collins Hall from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. approximately, for the presentations of awards and to allow participants and onlookers to warm up. Since this is a municipal function, I'm assuming that the Collins Hall is made available for this purpose as usual. Okay, moved by Councillor Hamilton and second by Councillor Denley. Again, the date is November 24th, is the parade, and it starts at 7 p.m. And the Collins Hall is the final destination where they will have hot chocolate, hot dogs, and things of that nature. Any questions? All in favor? No one against? The motion's carried. Report from the Director of Administrative Services concerning the final payout of the Mount Dufour Groomer Agreement. Would you like to speak to that, Mr. Kukuritis?
Yes, Your Worship. I'll try to make it brief. Basically, the report gave a little bit of history for those councillors and maybe some members of the public who weren't here in the year roughly 2001, whereby the city, Elnos, and the Ski Hill signed an agreement to purchase a newer groomer for the Ski Hill in the $250,000 range. All the resolutions, etc., and reports are indicated in the report. At the time, the groomer was purchased in late September of 2001. The agreement read that we would pay $25,000 per year on the principal with some interest, etc., establishing a reserve at that particular time, which was done in the year 2001. We paid 4 years on this, leaving about 150 principal balance outstanding on this, and that's exactly what's in the reserve. To date, I haven't made the 2006 payment, and just in an effort to reduce the administrative time in managing this contract, both from City and Elnod's management's point of view, I contacted Mr. Elliot at Elnos and exploring the idea of just receiving the outstanding principal balance to bring this contract to a close. He was more in full agreement to do so, because it takes his time too to notify me that I forgot to make the payment, etc., to monitor the funding arrangements, etc., and the interest calculations all through this particular years. So given this concurrence with Elnos, I'm recommending that this report be received and accepted, and that you provide me the authorizations to conclude this particular agreement by issuing the final payment of $150 at Elnos, and that we subsequently close the Mount Dufour Ski Hill Reserve. There's no additional liability here. This whole thing was set up back in 2001. The reserve is there strictly to match the payments of $25,000 a year, but I'd rather just conclude it and end this particular arrangement.
Councillor Hamilton?
And I appreciate your concern, and it certainly looks like a good fiscal thing to do. My question is, we are on those provisions of lame duck, and we are limited by what we can spend. Would the provisions of lame duck prevent us from actually transferring those funds to this project at $150,000?
No, Councillor Hamilton, because the liability was incurred in 2001, so there's no additional liability being incurred in the nomination period, which reads in the Section 275 of the Act. It's simply just using what reserve funds were set up to cover that particular liability back in 2001 and ending the agreement, rather than do it in the next 5 years.
Okay, are you moving? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Denley. Any questions, Councillor Sullivan?
There's a different matter involved with this also. I can understand wanting to pay the bill out, and the money's there anyway, and we're going to be saving some interest charges. But part of this agreement is with Mount Dufour itself, and the terms and conditions of the agreement, there's 4 parts or 5 parts to it. Part of it is that they make an annual report to council. So upon getting the new groomer, they had to make an annual report, a business plan, and the report from the previous year. So what does that do to us now? Now, what does that do with this contract with the Mount Dufour and their obligations for this purchasing of this groomer? Does that now take them off the hook? Are they no longer have to supply the city with information on how they're doing or what they're doing with this $250,000 groomer?
No, because in that section of the agreement on page 2, it talks about the grant shall be made in accordance with paragraph 1, provided that Mount Dufour. So it was already considered as a grant. It was already considered as a grant, and what we did is we put the money aside in a reserve, and we were annually taking $25,000. So even if Mount Dufour had not fulfilled the 5 items in that grant provision, we were still obligated to make the payments to ELNOS because we gave an unconditional guarantee that we would pay that loan. So we would still have the Mount due for submit these things because that's part of the agreement that they signed with us, that in consideration of granting them $250,000 to purchase a new groomer, that they would do these things, including annually to the city on a date and time to be determined by the city council, a presentation which includes a report on the finances and operation of Mount due for, so on and so forth.
So
Nothing should change technically.
So what you're saying to me is that if the city makes a deal with ELNOS and pays out the debt, that the terms and conditions of the contract with Mount Duport remain in effect.
That's correct.
So this money does not affect that at all.
No.
Okay?
Any other comments, Councillor Reinhardt?
Just wondering, what will the savings be like if we, or are there any interest savings at all?
There are no interest savings because the interest on the reserve is also remitted as a portion of the agreement to ELNOS to assist the ski hill in regards to their fundraising efforts. It's part of the agreement. That's the reason the reserve had to be established separate in order to calculate the interest, which the interest is being remitted. And in some cases, I fall behind 2 years in relating or forwarding that particular calculation.
Basically, this is simply to simplify the paperwork administratively. The money's set aside rather than every year receive all these different invoices from ELNOS. Just pay it off because we still have to pay it. We have an obligation. It's no different than a homeowner that may have the money in a bank account rather than continue to issue a monthly check, just pay off the whole mortgage. They have the money. Okay, Councillor Sully?
I realize, I wasn't here when this agreement was made, but what the documentation says is that we took $250,000 from our operating account and put into reserves to be paid out at $25,000 a year for 10 years. Why? Why wouldn't we have just taken the $250,000 and paid for it? Why would we pay it over a 10-year period? We're not saving any money. We're not making any money. What was the rationale behind it?
The rationale for that, I believe at the time, was to demonstrate to the Mount Duport organization that annually the city was contributing $25,000 towards their operation. In effect, an annual grant of $25,000. Because you have to understand that the groomer they had was failing, and if they did not have another groomer, preferably a new one such as this, that they would not be able to stay in operation. And we all know there's between 300 to 400 young people from Elliot Lake that use that facility at any one time, sometimes on a Sunday or Saturday or throughout the season. And we just wanted to demonstrate to them that we're prepared to assist you, but you need to work with us to make sure that you follow your obligations towards it. So is it any different than the $1.8 million that we borrowed for the St. Joseph's Manor in order to make the project occur, where at the time we did have the reserves? We could have used our reserves to pay the full amount. In fact, that $1.8 million is a little bit misunderstood. Retirement Living committed $250,000, and we committed $1,550,000. But Retirement Living's $250,000 came to us, so we took on the full obligation, and Retirement Living has paid in advance their $250,000 to us. So this is a similar situation. It's in order to keep the heart of the community pumping, sometimes you have to step in and help certain worthy organizations to maintain their presence and function properly. Councillor McTaggart?
Dennis, You said there was no interest involved, but in the emails that you, on the, excuse me, Appendix F, says close it out with a single payment, if possible, since it includes some complicating factors like the computation of interest, forgiveness, etc. Could you explain that then?
The interest forgiveness portion is on the LNOS side in relation to the loan, because the scale is supposed to try and establish some fund rating techniques. They don't reach a certain particular amount, if I'm not mistaken. They have to do this interest calculation forgiveness on the loan to the ski hill in order to compensate for the lack of funding. So again, this is one of the reasons why I want to get rid of it, to pay out the whole obligation. Is from their point of view, our point of view, it's strictly an administrative matter that always seems to get we forget at the end of the year end to pay out. You know, they once sent me a bill for additional interest on it. I didn't pay it because it just took me long enough to get to it. So the interest forgiveness is on the LNOS side. It's not interest forgiveness on our side, because any interest that we make on the reserve has been remitted in addition to the $25,000 on an annual basis.
Okay, if there are no further questions, all in favor?
Yeah.
No one against, motion is carried. The next is a letter from the Civic Awards Committee Secretary regarding the nominations of the 2006 Civic Awards. Councillor Soulier, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, Your Worship, thank you.
This is fabulous.
We have, our committee has done its work, it's advertised in the local media. We have a committee consisting of Rona Girton, Ken Pierce, Al Hemingway, myself, and we have a corporate secretary, Danielle. We have chosen, through our committee, 2 excellent people this year for the Civic Award, and the motion reads as follows: that it be recommended to the Council of the City of Elliot Lake that Virginia Bullard and Diana Graham Vale be awarded the Elliot Lake Civic Awards for 2006. I know that these people are both known to all of Council, so you know the excellent choices that were there. It was a good job, and I'm very, very proud to present this.
Thank you very much. I'd like to congratulate the 2 recipients, and of course there is coming up a Civic Awards ceremony which will be taking place, where the 2 recipients will be honored along with all the those that serve the councils in one capacity or another as volunteers. They will also be invited to celebrate the achievements of Mrs. Virginia Bullard and Mrs. Diana Graham Vale, who work tirelessly on behalf of different causes throughout the community. So I want to thank yourself and members of your committee for a job well done, and we look forward to seeing the 2 recipients at the Civic Awards this year, which will take place November.
Just as a funny little story behind it, Verge Bullard, it says Virginia here, but her name is Verge. It's only the way I know her. She was nominated by 2 different groups of people. So when we do our evaluation, we get our package, all we know is the number of people that are in the package. We don't know who's in there until we finally get it and then we get our sheets. So I was surprised I read one, and then it came back in. I got a repeat, and I thought, this is strange. But then I realized there was 2 different parties that had nominated the same person, which is unique.
So it made your job a little easier, I think.
Well,
Okay, moved by Councillor Hamilton and seconded by Councillor McTaggart. Any comments? We look forward to the Civic Awards, which will take place November 9th. All in favor? Carried. Next item is a report from Director of Projects, Tourism and Leisure concerning the site preparation work for the Miners Memorial and the site work at the Horn Lake Park. Mr. Gagnon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council will recall that around a little over a year ago now, we established the Miners Monument at the Horn Lake Park, and shortly thereafter, Council established an ad hoc committee to move forward with a Miners Memorial, which would include the names of miners who lost their lives either from occupational illness or from mine-related accidents. The artist Laura Brown Greenbelt was commissioned earlier this year, and she's rapidly approaching a time where she plans to install the memorial artwork and the granite and etc. at the Horn Lake Park, just to the north of the existing monument. In order to do that, Council will recall we had a report in May where the United Steelworkers are funding the large proportion of the project. They'll be funding the artwork, and where the city agreed to fund the site prep work required. At that time, we had an initial estimate of $20,000, but that wasn't based on anything concrete. We do now have a concrete quote for the Miners Memorial site work for the curb, the paving stone, the concrete bases for the memorial, and that's approximately $37,000. Plus, I built in a 10% contingency, so we have requesting approximately $40,000 in work to prepare the site in the coming weeks for that to be installed at some point in the month of November. In order to do that work, we would require council to use a procurement policy to contract that work directly to KJ Beamish, given the nature of the work at hand, using unit prices that have been previously tendered, and the fact that we're under the gun for timing in order to accommodate the site work and the installation of the memorial. The memorial will be installed this fall in November, with the official opening, as most of council is aware, on April 28th, 2007.
Now, there was, maybe you can just back up a little bit. When we did the Miners Monument Park, at the time, we weren't expecting to receive any funding from FedNor. Subsequent to that, we did receive a significant amount. You recall those numbers?
Yeah, I believe it was $150,000 from FedNor with the council resolution. There were some strings attached to that we put that money back in the Destination Elliot Lake Reserve.
Okay.
So I presume that had been done, or if we've received the money, have we received it? Yeah, we have. So you're right, that reserve would have been increased by $150,000 this year from FedNor, and then now we're requesting $40,000 be taken from that reserve for Phase 2. And that was for FedNor's rationale for providing that money after we had already incurred the expenses in 2005, was knowing that there would be future phases to that miners monument / memorial Horn Lake Park area as part of Destination Elliot Lake. So hence the resolution to put it back in the reserve.
So very interestingly, that magnificent site, which I'm always delighted when I drive by to see not just one car, but 2, 3, half a dozen at a time. Any hours sometimes you can see them in the evening. They're sitting and just enjoying the site. In effect, the total project, which exceeded $1 million with this coming on, cost the local taxpayers probably in the range of 10 to 15%, going back to the original park and monument and
that's correct.
And all the infrastructure work.
Between FedNor, the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund Corporation, Rio Algom, and now the United Steelworkers, and some reserve funding. You're right. The 10 to 15% would be accurate off the top of my head without seeing the exact numbers here.
So
right.
this is a compliment to our staff who are always out there looking around for outside the local taxpayers' money to make these projects happen. And this is the Horn Lake Park, the monument, the memorial now. In this particular case, the first time around we had Rio Algom provide money. We had Northern Heritage. We had FedNor, which came through eventually. Now we have the steelworkers paying the lion's share of this, which is about $140,000 that they will be putting in, all for the enjoyment of the citizens of Elliot Lake, at maybe 10 to 15% coming directly from the ratepayers of Elliot Lake, which is fantastic. I want to commend you, Sir Gagnon, and the entire staff for being busy beavers out there looking for money for us all the time.
Thank you.
I want to thank Councillor Hamilton, who chaired the committee that they put in a lot of time, along with some private citizens on this, to make this possible, because we feel it's very important to honor the memory of those who gave their lives in the process of building Elliot Lake, either accidentally or through industrial disease, and their families, I believe, will appreciate, and it will be a magnificent piece of art that will have the dignity to it for where people can go and reflect and just remember those that are remembered on that monument. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, second by Councillor Suya. Any further questions? I also want to thank Councillor Reinhardt, who acted as secretary, taking notes and transcribing notes, Councillor Suya, Denley, and others. All in favor? Carried. Next item is a report from the Official Plan and Bylaw Committee recommending the adoption of the new building and moving bylaws. Councillor Denley, did you want to speak to this?
Very briefly, if you have any questions, but this one particular bylaw, and I'll read it, is 29 for 2006, and I'll read it verbatim. It is that the report CB 2006-13 of the chief building official and the recommendations contained therein regarding the adoption of a new building bylaw and moving bylaw be recommended to council for consideration. So and also move it.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that?
I just
Councillor Barda, yes, Councillor.
I just quickly want to comment, and then if Mr. Allard really is the expert at this, but basically what this is just exactly what it says. It's a moving bylaw, and there will now be a fee, a permit fee of, it's recommended to be $100 if council approves this. This is separate from what we saw earlier on, and there will be a separate, quite apart from the raise, this is like an aside to the fees that will be raised for permits and different things. There will be two bylaws passed tonight.
And this is primarily for moving buildings. So we have in the past seen where, thank God it doesn't happen anymore, when the mines closed and the mine sites were being decommissioned, anybody that has been to Denison Mine site could see where the driveways are still there. These homes were actually lifted using I-beams and special techniques and moved away somewhere where they exist. We don't know where, but they're probably homes that somebody are still living in them, and some of them were quite large. So now, in order to do that, they need a permit, and with it, that way our building department has some controls on it, plus a fee of $100. Anything you want to add to that, Still?
Yes, Your Worship. That bylaw essentially is to replace a portion of the existing building bylaw that dealt with the moving of buildings. And because we were in the process of rewriting the building bylaw, which comes under Section 7 of the Building Code Act, we could not bring along those provisions that dealt with moving buildings across streets, which the authority for a bylaw of that nature comes under Section 110 of the Highway Traffic Act. So we had to incorporate them in two separate bylaws.
Okay. Any other questions? All in favor? No one against? The motion is carried. The next item is a memo from the city clerk concerning rescheduling or canceling the November 13th, 2006 council meeting. Of course, November 13th is the election day, and I'm sure there's those of you that want to be available for that day. Thank God I don't have to do it. And so the recommendation is to reschedule to the 6th or to cancel, remembering that October is 5 Mondays, so we will be not having a meeting next week, so the 6th would be appropriate, which would sort of put us back on schedule, and then we will have our final meeting, which will take place on the 27th of November. Move, Councillor Denley?
I'll move it for purposes.
Okay, I have a seconder, Councillor Reinhardt. Go ahead.
Thank you. I don't know how everybody else's schedule on that particular Monday. There are a number of events going on that evening. If I'm the only one that's in conflict, then I'll have to make other arrangements. What's your pleasure?
If we don't have a meeting, we cancel the 13th, we don't have the 6th, that's going to take there's always business that needs to be attended to. I believe though, if we have a quorum, we'll have to go along with it. How's everybody's feeling on that? Okay. Okay. So the next council meeting will be the 6th of November instead of the 13th of November. All in favor? Against? Motion's carried. We have the check register number 10/05/06 in the amount of $618,685.83. A motion moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor McTaggart. There's a number of large, if you're wondering where the 600,000 comes from, the transit is 17,000, Algoma District Services Administration Board, 185,000. Claim secure, 20,000, that's for the medical plan. HNC pole line, 10,000. Hydro One Networks, 51,000. KJ Beamish Construction, 84,000. McDougall Fuels, 11. Receiver General, our friendly government in Ottawa, 59,000. Northland Engineering, 23, and Municipal Waste Recycling, 14. So that doesn't take long to get some of those big amounts. Any questions other than that? All in favor? No one against. That motion's carried. We have bylaw number 06-95, being a bylaw to establish fees for permits within the city of Elliot Lake. And we had that presentation at the public meeting tonight between 6:30 and 7:10. Any mover for this, please?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Sui and second by Councillor Barda. Any questions on this one? Mr. Lard?
Yes, Your Worship, I'd like to beg the indulgence of members of council and yourself in regards to the schedule that's attached to that bylaw. The first row of the schedule has some numbers that have crept in from an earlier proposal, and an amendment of that particular row would be in order to match up with the report that was done by the consultant. The instead of $1,600 for the first 1,500 square feet, that should read $2,000 for the first 1,500 square feet. And in the next column, the rate per square foot should read $1.33 per square foot for buildings with a floor area over 1,500 square feet.
Otherwise, everything is accurate.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So that will be amended accordingly so that for a Group C low-density residential, that includes cottages, up to 1,500 square feet will be $2,000, and thereafter it will be $1.33 per square foot. Okay, any other questions? All in favor? No one against? Motion's carried. Next one is bylaw number 06-97, being a bylaw to authorize an agreement with Wendell Farquhar Trucking Limited with respect to the supply of winter sand. Moved by Councillor Hamilton and seconded by Councillor Denley. Any questions, comments? All in favor? No one against. That motion's carried. Bylaw number 06-99, being a bylaw to authorize the regulation of construction, demolition, and change of use with respect to building, and repeal bylaw number 78-47. And then we just dealt with that. Motion? Moved by Councillor Barda and seconded by Councillor Reinhardt. Any questions on this bylaw? There being no questions, all in favor? No one against. That motion's carried. Bylaw number 06-100, being a bylaw to regulate the moving of building structures and oversized loads within the city of Elliot Lake.
So move.
Moved by Councillor Sui, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. Any questions? There being none, all in favor? No one against. That motion's carried. A motion to place the addendum on the agenda. Moved by Councillor Denley and seconded by Councillor McTaggart. Any questions? All in favor? No one against. We have a public presentation, under public, it's a closed session, and that's a verbal report from the Director of Operations regarding a property matter where he's providing us with a solicitor privilege, advice. Under correspondence and reports, we have first item, a report from the Director of Administrative Services concerning participation.
Just a point of clarification, if I could.
Mhm.
I'm on item number 1, the public presentation in camera. I can't help but seeing how much controversy is being whipped up over in-camera sessions, and it reminded me of something from before the last election, or maybe even the one before that, where people were making promises. They were running for council, making promises that they were going to cut taxes for new businesses coming to town until they found out that was illegal. Then this item comes up where people are saying, well, we're going to have no in-camera sessions, or we're going to have less in-camera sessions. I think it's really important that everyone understands why we have in-camera and that we don't abuse it, and that there are statutory reasons, legal reasons why we have to in-camera for certain things. I think, and I know you've taken the time, probably 2 or 3 times a year, if not more, to explain why we go in camera and why we have to go in camera and when it's discretionary. And just want to make sure that everybody was clear why we were going in camera for this item here.
Okay, thank you for your input on it, and you're quite correct. The municipality is a corporation, which means it has legal obligations and legal ramifications, and I have to, while we're on this topic, ask Mr. Derrick, who was a advisor with the province and municipal affairs, if you can just give us a brief explanation about this in-camera issue. And
thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. You're correct. The Municipal Act provides that under certain conditions, council meetings can be held, or portions of council meetings can be held in camera. And specifically, it outlines property matters. It could be transfers of properties, sales of properties, or it could be issues concerning property standards, buildings that are of a concern to the municipality, and in which you require legal counsel. There are 2 reports actually on tonight that fall into that category. The first is the report you just referred to, which our Director of Administrative Services has said includes a legal opinion, and the other reports concerning the Elliot Lake Public Library also includes a solicitor's opinion, which I received today, and which council should appropriately receive in camera.
okay, thank you. So we'll proceed to correspondence and reports, and the first item is a report from the Director of Administrative Services concerning participation in an economic development study. Mr.
Now, I just have a point of procedure on this one.
Okay.
I was,
Mr. White. Oh, this is where you want to declare, is that it?
yeah, well, I just had time to review it
Okay.
because we came tonight, and it's an issue where I don't really have a conflict, because I think there is a community of interest here, something that's for everybody in the community,
Okay.
but just in the interest of keeping things, the lines drawn very clearly around myself and my employer, I declare an indirect conflict. in this.
Okay, and that's fair, and that'll be noted in the minutes, so you can refrain from any discussions. Okay, Mr. Kukoritis?
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a quick report in regards to conducting an economic impact study. Just in late September, I had an informal discussion with a member of the Elliot Lake Retirement Living in regards to considering or involving in such a study. At that time, I asked them to submit a brief formal proposal or outline of who will conduct the study, the intent of the study, and what's required in regards to city, whether it be in personnel and or in finances. As you can see, attached to the report is Appendix A, which is the Retirements for Living's proposal in regards to the economic impact study. At that time, I asked Mr. Gagnon, our Director of Projects, Tourism and Leisure, to ask him to provide me some advantages to doing this, and the couple of paragraphs that are in my report are basically his words, which reads basically that proposal for retirement living to do some significant detailed research into the economic impact of the retirement concept of the community is a desirable one. We need to better understand the impact it has on attracting retirees to support job creation in the local economy. In addition, it will also assist us in having some actual factual data to apply for projects in regards to the community infrastructure. Based on this particular proposal, it will also help Mr. Gagnon on a professional development purpose, which is outlined in your report. The request from Elliot Lake Retirement Living is to have a staff member, which Mr. Gagnon is more than willing to take on, to deal with Dr. Kubursi and his staff in providing the information they require. In addition to that, the proposal asks that we provide a contribution or an upset limit to $15,000 towards this particular project, and it has no impact on the budget, as there's a consultant line already in the economic development budget, which is not being used at this particular point in time, or we'll see come to fruition by year end. So I'm recommending that we really get involved in this economic impact study, that we approve it, that we participate in it, and that we assign Mr. Gagnon to it, and an offset limit of $15,000 be contributed towards this study.
Okay. Can I have a mover? Councillor McTaggart, seconder. Councillor Hamilton. I can perhaps add a little bit to this. This study is long overdue. As we just heard a few minutes ago from Mr. Gagnon when he was talking about the business retention and expansion interviews, we have about 375 approximately businesses with an employment base of about 3,000. That includes private, public sector. We have an economy in Elliot Lake which, quite frankly, is an aberration in the rest of the country. A lot of government officials admire what we have done in Elliot Lake, but I think when it comes down to the hard facts, they don't understand it, because most economies are traditionally based on some sort of industry, quote unquote. Maybe a steel industry, a mining industry, a wood industry, sawmill, paper mill, or it could be high tech, or it could be the auto industry and things of that nature. So, and governments have compartments for all of those. You've noticed in the past few years where government has contributed millions of dollars in order to entice a Toyota plant or an expansion of a Honda plant or things of that nature, or they would assist a certain industry to expand by providing infrastructure, money, training, and whatever. And we have reached an economy in Elliot Lake that today, as of 2004, Stats Canada's number is generating $250 million in income to various individuals in the community. So this economy is not very well understood, and therefore, when we go to government for things that we deem to be essential to our industry, and case in point is like the golf course. The golf course is absolutely important to the economy of Elliot Lake, just as any other hard infrastructure that the government would put in the car industry, because by having a golf course in Elliot Lake, we are, this year alone, attracted 2,500 tourists into the community from out of town. And there's a spin-off from that. We don't know what that number. What this study will do is we'll go in depth and dissect all those different parts of our economy and make it understandable so that when we go to government for different grants, different programs, and things of that nature, we will be armed with a third-party economist report that's understood by funding agencies, it's understood by government, and it's understood, in fact, by industry if we ever have to sell it to the industry. And this is what this is about. For $15,000, it's going to give us what sort of an economy we have in Elliot Lake. We all have different opinions of it and different ideas of it, but we really don't know it as well as we should. And this report, if I understand it correctly, it's going to be done by a reputable professor who I happen to know at McMaster, will really give us something that we could all share with the community and those other funding agencies. Mr. Kukuraitis?
Yes, and I forgot one point which you made me remember, Your Worship, is in addition to this we'll be getting a working model out of this particular thing. He was developing a model unique to the community so that it can be used for future input in regards to knowing the multipliers, etc.
Okay. I just thought it's important because this is long overdue, and it'll give us a snapshot of what our economy is all about. Any other questions? Councillor McTaggart?
I just wanted to ask Mr. Kukuraitis, would you share the website of for people if they want to check into he's highly respected at all levels of government. A visit to his company's website reveals a long list of studies, references, and consulting and time.
Yes, that's a good point, Councillor McTaggart. Dr. Kubursi is a professor of economics at McMaster University. He's highly respected in all levels of government, and he has a company website which is www.econometricsearchlimited, which is one word, .com.
Yeah, econometricresearchlimited.com, yeah.
Okay. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. The next item is a report from the Director of Administrative Services concerning the demolition of the derelict apartment buildings at 90 and 100 Hillside Drive and 25 Willoughby Road. Mr. Kukuraitis?
Yes, Your Worship. Before I get into that, I just got some pictures here, and I wanted to give you some special effects in regards to what I'm talking about, and I've cited that in my report, so if you bear with me, I'd like you to, there's two packages, so just crisscross them.
Okay. I noticed the buildings suddenly have no windows in them.
I think you'll appreciate the devastation on the inside, which was malicious, by the way. The property, as you know, most of the background I have in here was from the original report that we asked to declare surplus and to have the tax write-offs after it has vested with us. So I won't particularly go into that very much. The only part I'm going to get into is that we took the property on October 6th with no tenants remaining in the building, which was quite a lengthy process involving ADSAB and Algoma Health Unit. Prior to taking the title, I had requested the fire chief to send some individuals from the fire department up there to take a look at that, and he was very unsuccessful in the attempts due to no cooperation with the landlord at that particular time. His report is attached. That same thing happened with the property standards inspection first time around. Subsequently, after we took title, Mr. Kluche went in and he's provided a report in regards to the property standards. He was kind enough to also provide us those pictures. His report is also attached as Appendix B. At this particular stage, Council is now in the position to consider two options. We can proceed under the city's land sale and advertise and sell the property at any price below the cancellation price of roughly $76,000, or proceed to demolish the buildings. Mr. Kluche's inspection report attached today puts forth that these buildings should be considered for demolition. And in there I said I'll be passing pictures, and you can obviously see why and get a feel for the building of the standard issues and the subsequent malicious destruction of the interior that occurred in those buildings. Due to the widespread malicious interior destruction in all three buildings, these buildings are really now rendered uninhabitable. Given this, I am recommending that the properties known as 90 and 100 Hillside and 25 Willoughby be demolished. Prior to all of this, I had put out invitational tenders, which in most cases we try to do to consider demolition of suspected states of the properties, which we suspected was quite bad in the first place. The inspection report by the Property Standards Office and Building Department validates the advanced judgment needed for demolition costing, not to mention the unforeseen acts of destruction to the interior. The only tender we received from the invitational was Wendell Farquhar Trucking. Attached as Appendix C is a said demolition quote for an upset limit of $197,000, which I'm recommending for acceptance. The quote is for complete removal of all buildings, including the basements, all asphalt, any oil tanks, termination of all services, final grading with fill, and hydro seeding. The only imperative note that council should consider is with the oil tanks. We've had some consideration of the possibility of an environmental concern. I already gave authorization to have the site inspected and test for contaminants. The testing done by MR Wright cannot be conducted until today, who will be overseeing the oil tank removal and also will do the pre and post reports to provide the city with a clear billing that's required by law. In addition, a certified tank removal TSSA license holder is required to perform the oil tank removals. In the quote, there's presently $60,000 contingency for these measures, which works out to about $20,000 per building. I had a brief conversation with them this morning. They took the dirt off. There are 1,000-gallon tanks at each building. The preliminary report won't be made available for a few days. Until the testing is conducted and results analyzed, the true cost of the item can't really be actually determined. The quote could be either too low or too high. But if there is significant environmental issues, you'll be certain I'll be coming back to council. But in my preliminary discussion this morning, I don't think that that's going to happen, which, thank God, that isn't going to happen. As per the city's bylaw 0643, being a bylaw to establish rules and regulations that require an exterminator certificate prior to municipal authorization for the demolition or moving of the buildings from the city of Elliot Lake. The extermination for rodents was conducted on October 17th, and I believe today they'll be doing fumigation, so we'll be compliant with that bylaw. As to funding for it, there is money in the capital portion for tax-registered property demolition, which was set out as $260,000. There's an error there. There should be an extra zero. The Dieppe Plaza and Laurentian Field Station were demolished this year also, leaving a balance of about just under 102. This means we require an additional 95 on the upset limit, and I'm asking, which is about 31,000 per building. I'm asking that it be transferred from one of the particular reserves that we still have available to capital to give this. So, Your Worship and Council, given the above and the absolutely uninhabitable state of these buildings, which I think you've gotten from the pictures, it's recommended that my report be received and accepted, that council approves and immediately proceeds with the demolition of those properties known as 90 and 100 Hillside and 25 Willoughby, and that council accepts the invitational tender of Wendell Farquhar Trucking attached as Appendix C of $197,000 for said demolition costs, and that council transfer an upset limit of $95,500 from the Tailings Management Appeal Reserve to cover the balance required under the demolition of this project.
Councillor Hamilton and Councillor Sully.
Well, I wish the public sees these pictures, because that's some of the most disgusting things I've seen in a long time.
Isn't it?
My question is simply put, and I know we don't normally do this, but what legal recourse do we have against a gentleman like this who actually goes and knowing he's going to lose those buildings and destroy them beyond repair, knowing full well the taxpayers are going to pick up the cost and demolish those buildings? I really need to know that answer, because I think we need to set an example with this gentleman. We really do.
Well, the verification of the proof would be what was in the building prior to these pictures being in there, and I can talk to our building inspector prior to that, see if he has any pictures previous to that.
Well, simply put, there were toilets in there, there were sinks, there were bathtubs, because people had to have those kinds of facilities. Those were destroyed upon leaving. That's a reasonable assumption.
The windows were removed. I believe the boiler was removed.
And from what I saw, it looked like fresh drywall had literally been punched right out. with hammers, crowbars, or God knows what, looking at those pictures.
Okay,
Correct.
perhaps you can look into what legal recourse in terms of the police investigating this, and maybe charges may have to be laid.
I can do that, Your Worship. I just,
But
at this point, I just thought that,
I understand it's
We've
a
had
separate
enough.
issue.
No, it's a separate issue.
It is a
Separate
separate
issue,
issue, but it's an important one because we can't allow that to happen.
Councillor Sully?
I can certainly start looking into it if you want, you wish.
Councillor Sully?
I think we have two issues tonight, and I would recommend, first of all, that we proceed to and decide to demolish those buildings. Get that off our plate first, because there's going to be, I think, in my mind, a bit of a problem with the second part because of our lame duck effect. But I think, first of all, we should decide what we want to do with those properties. And I would recommend that we demolish them.
Okay, do you have a seconder? Okay, Councillor Barda. Mr. Derek, could you just respond to Councillor Sully about the lame duck issue, given that money's been, or you want Ms. Corridas, either one of the two? Okay, could you respond?
Yeah, Your Worship, as far as I'm concerned, there is really no lame duck issue. This is a matter of health and safety. It's very grave when you look at the particular stuff. Electrical panels ripped out of the wall. We're getting the hydro cut off. I believe hopefully it has been done. I just don't see it being a lame duck issue. The item itself has been generally classified under tax registered properties under capital. A simple transfer reserve. I don't believe we'll need the whole 95 additional balance. It's just there's an upset limit in regards to, at the time that I was doing this report, which was late last week, we were very concerned about the oil tanks and finding it. So I don't think we're going to hit that. Looking at lame duck at 31,000 per building, I don't think we're in that ballpark of 50,000. It's a real health and safety issue because once the demolition starts, I'm also going to have to hire security in it to make sure that nobody falls in a hole or a pit for about 4 or 5 days.
Mr. Derek?
For insurance requirements.
Your Worship, I was just going to add that there is the city's responsibility to ensure that those premises, which have been vandalized and have no windows in some areas, are guarded against the possibility of a citizen, a child, for example, entering the building and becoming injured, which would bring a liability on us. And I think Dennis has just remarked about that.
Okay. Councillor Reinhardt?
Go ahead first.
Well, I agree with Councillor Sawyer. It's two issues. The thing missing from the report when I first read it were the options, and proceed to demolish or land sale. But I thought previous to this meeting that an RFP could go out, somebody could do something with the buildings. But it's plain that there's more damage to those buildings than they'd ever be worth fixing. There's hundreds of thousands of damage. Plus, another thing that was in the report that we read tonight, that the damage to the building from water, in terms of mold and structural damage, it's quickly removing the option of doing anything with the buildings. The safety factor that's coming into play, the liability that the city's incurring, and even if we took an RFP on this, transferring those buildings to somebody else, I don't even know if I'd even want to entertain the risk involved with that. Even if somebody thought that they might put, I don't know, let's say $1 million into them and bring them up to standard. I mean, in the meantime, what do we have in our hands here? But the money, I'd like to know for sure that we aren't, and I think most people that saw what's going on here tonight, most reasonable people would agree with that. So I'm not worried about any repercussions from somebody coming along and saying, I think I could have done something with those buildings. It's out of the question. But on the other hand, I don't want to put council in a position where we're battling someone on the issue of did we spend money when we shouldn't have. So I think we better have our numbers. I think we should not spend more than we have. How much did we have already? That's 120 left.
We had
We had 260,000 in the budget. I have other money in the capital budget that's set aside that can be moved around, which would not incur the liability. I'm just trying to consider the fact of what's coming in 2007 and trying to hold that particular unfinanced one. If you're not comfortable with that, all of it is in the budget.
Okay.
In some form or other, if you don't want to do the transfer from reserve, I have other aspects in the capital budget which can cover that.
Yeah, I'd be far more comfortable, especially when people are concerned about procedure and due diligence and so on. And we are too, obviously.
So why not
Why don't we-
set that upset limit from this $50,000, which will stay within the legislation,
Well, other
then
than
move the rest of the money from one of your other budgets?
Well, Your Worship, I always have, when we get to land sales and commercial, land sales and the capital, I always tend to leave a bit of that in there for future things, for unforeseen things. This is one of the unforeseen things where we didn't think we were going to anticipate all of these particular properties for demolition. I can take it completely out of there. There's $108,000 right there sitting in unfinanced capital to be used to cover the 95.5.
Yeah.
I just thought I'd leave it there because we have some other projects coming next year.
But
which are
it's something
important.
but you can do it with the next council and build
that's
up
correct.
that reserve again. I think
That's correct.
it's legitimate. Councillor Sully?
Part of the restrictions that under this act, it says the disposition of any real or personal property of the municipality which had a value exceeding $50,000 when it was acquired by the municipality. Simply, that is not worth $50,000, so I think that is our out. If we're not allowed to sell anything over $50,000, that I don't. If you want to get a professional appraiser for that takes us out of that $50,000 limit, because the value of the property is less than that. Therefore, we are able to do that.
But in any case, I think from the advice we're receiving from staff, that the funds are available through reserves that are already been set up for this purpose, and they're prepared to just use that money. And just to bring it in terms of dollars and cents, this whole situation with those buildings, in effect, have cost the taxpayers, by the time it's all said and done, $373,000. With the taxes that we lost,
I'd
plus
say
the
more
money
than that.
we're spending on top of it.
I'd say a lot more than that.
Probably
with the legal,
and all the staff time
say
and
400.
things of that nature. So this is a lesson for the next council and councils that whenever you come to these situations, you have to move as fast as you can within the law to make sure that these don't recur again, because we've been burned so many times now with this. The All Nation, the Spruce Clinic, the Up Plaza, you can just go on. When these things fail, they become derelicts, it's taxpayers pay. Councillor
And I think
Hamilton?
what we also need to realize, this is a lesson in legislative reform. Quite frankly, we should not have to be in the position to wait 4 years, not only to lose all of that money, but to end up having to spend an equal amount to rip the place down. It's just absolutely deplorable, and I think we need to make that kind of legislative reform through our Association of Municipalities or a few others. We've got to make this happen. This is ridiculous.
Just on that note, Your Worship, Councillor, what Councillor Hamilton said is correct. I've been expressing that every time I go to certain conferences, etc. Everybody's there. We really don't see any change in the Municipal Act. I believe there are some revisions coming up, but they probably won't include this. But you're absolutely right. Staff can't do it alone. It has to be political pressure that needs to be applied to the province in order to change those particular requirements.
The reason it is not changing, because again, it's the center of the universe, Toronto, drives this whole thing, because the property values in those major centers will more than offset any of those losses that those municipalities lose. They can demolish that land and not lose $373,000, but make probably $1 million because the land is so valuable. But in smaller communities, especially in Northern Ontario, there's very low values for vacant land.
Well, one of the reasons it's expensive in regards to the demolition, Your Worship, and I think you all agree, is that I wanted that particular property to ensure there was no environmental concerns, but everything removed in case we could sell it for any other future development, so that the person buying it, we wouldn't run into liability issues by selling a piece of property with tanks and basements in there. So it's being trying to be restored to natural
Yep.
state.
Okay, so we have a mover and a seconder, and staff have satisfied us that we're within the Municipal Act to expend this money from the sources that we have already set aside. So any other questions or comments on this? Okay.
And it is a quick question. Mr. Gutierrez, this building's actually half demolished already, so the job's going to be a piece of cake. But how long ago, did this damage all occur within the past year from those photographs, or is that just recent? Like from the outside?
I speculate that it was done over the Thanksgiving weekend.
Wow. Are we going to be able to show those pictures to the people here?
Well, the media could have them.
Okay.
I've already expressed that a week ago.
Yeah, and they should be turned over to the police as well.
Thank you.
Any further comments, questions? They're around. All in favor? Carried. That concludes the regular items. The next two items are the next item's in camera, and it's to deal with the issue with the Elliot Lake Public Library. I'm sure it's no secret that there's been some damage done due to water, and we will be discussing some options tonight. And a motion to go into camera. Mr. Derek?
Mr. Mayor, being sensitive to public concern about in-camera sessions, which isn't unique to Elliot Lake by any means, it arises in every municipality. For the sake of providing what information we can provide in public, we go back to issues of city's responsibility for public safety, health, making sure that a premises is suitable for use under the fire code, building code, and so on. When this matter of the leakage came to my attention last week, I asked the chair of the library board, Catherine Croxon, and our chief librarian, Susan Morin, and a number of staff persons who have expertise in various areas to come to a meeting and look at it comprehensively, because the leakage doesn't just apply to the library premises. So we got together and discussed health and safety issues under the appropriate legislation. Subsequently asked our building inspector to conduct an inspection, a thorough inspection. Our fire chief has done the same, and from that information got in touch with our insurance representatives, and we also contacted our city's legal counsel, had her review the lease agreement, and to suggest to us what options, remedial options, that we could consider. So I simply wanted to make these points, Your Worship, that again, it's due diligence to make certain that the city residents, the council, isn't faced with any kind of a liability that might flow out of this, considering this has been a problem for the past 15 to 16 years.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for that explanation. Motion to go in camera, moved by Councillor Reinhardt and seconded by Councillor Soulier. And once again, I would like to remind our citizens that the next council meeting will be on November the 6th, which is Monday, the first Monday of November. I want to thank you for being with us tonight, and I thank you for your patience with some of the technical difficulties we had with our PowerPoint presentation, and we hope that you'll be able to join us on November the 6th. Thank you and good night. All in favor? Carried.
Areas. Once again, it's time for celebrations. Celebrate special occasions with Celebrations. Birthdays, anniversaries, birth announcements, and more. Submit your internet message with our easy-to-use web-based forms. Celebrations, it's free and easy to use. Go to mytowntv.ca and get interactive. Coming up, it's the Event Guide, your source for things to do and places to go. Share personal messages on Bulletin Board. Share your community message on Bulletin Board by accessing our easy-to-use web-based forms. Bulletin Board, it's free and easy to use. Go to mytowntv.ca and get interactive. Up next on My Town, it's local classifieds on Traders Market, followed by birthday messages and more on Celebrations. Then stay tuned for messages about what's going on in your community with Bulletin Board.
Santa's coming to town Saturday, November 18th at 5:30. Parade Day is guaranteed to be a full day of fun for the entire family. This year's theme is nursery rhymes. Now's the time to enter a float, a marching band, or a dancing troupe. Entry applications can be found at the City of Greater Sudbury Leisure Services or on the city's website. Be one of 30,000 spectators to watch the Parade of Lights Saturday, November 18th. The Santa Claus Parade is proudly supported by the amazing Persona.
It's time once again for Traders Market.